Hey guys, welcome back to another Wuthering Waves video. With the closed beta being out for a good amount of time, myself and many testers have had the chance to sink our teeth into the game's playable cast of characters, figuring out its mechanics and combat systems so that when the game officially comes out, we'll be able to provide you with the best and most accurate information possible to ensure a good start to your experience. For those unaware, Wuthering Waves is a cross-platform open-world action RPG that's scheduled to be released later this year, which by the way, you guys can pre-register for the game right now using my link in the description. In anticipation of that, for today's video, I wanted to make a preliminary guide on 5 characters you should be on the lookout for upon Wuwa's official release in the near future. Bear in mind that this is being made based on closed beta information. In other words, everything is subject to change and is not indicative of the final version. So for all you know, this video will be completely obsolete by the time you actually need it, although I don't expect there to be major changes, perhaps a few balance adjustments if anything. The 5 units in this video are intended to be as all-covering as possible. I'm not making this on the basis of who are the strongest characters, rather who are the most important and who in my opinion will be the most helpful and practical units to have at your disposal. We're still trying to map out the game's mechanics, including standards for DPS and whatnot, but I have a good feeling that assuming there are no significant changes to their kits and numbers, these 5 will be of great use to you, especially in the early game. One last time, this is mostly theoretical and not set in stone. Things can change between now and live release. With that said, let's not waste any more time and get right into it, beginning with Verina. Verina is arguably the one character on this list that my opinion of will stay intact, unless they literally change her entire gameplay. With the huge emphasis being placed on combat in Wuwa, naturally you'll need someone who can ensure survivability for the team. And as of right now, there are only 2 choices for healers in the game, the stronger of which being Verina, a 5-star Spectre unit. She might actually be the most valuable character that we know of so far. Apart from being an SSR character, aka 5-star, and therefore having a higher power budget, Verina combines both healing and buffing. Typically when you think of healers at the beginning of a gacha, they don't last beyond the early game in light of only having healing and not much else. Verina, on the other hand, wears multiple hats. Let's start by talking about her liberation. Her ultimate is a blast of damage to nearby enemies that restores a big chunk of health to her party while applying a mark on damaged enemies. And if you attack marked enemies, she performs a follow-up attack that deals a small bit of damage and restores HP for the entire party on hit. So essentially with her ultimate, your teammates can drain tank for a fairly decent amount of time, which will be especially handy for one of the other units I talk about in this video. That is the focal point of Verina's kit. She's a healing support and a damn good one at that, offering a small bit of damage in conjunction with fantastic healing. What really underlines her capability though are her supportive buffs. Her first inherent skill provides an insurance policy for your team, preventing one party member from taking fatal damage and imbuing them with a shield for 10 seconds that has a cooldown of 10 minutes. This is extremely valuable to have in the early game as you're still learning boss patterns and how to parry and dodge attacks. By the way, this is permanently in effect. She doesn't have to be the active character, just be in the party. Her other inherent skill is personally for me the more interesting one. When Verina uses her skill Liberation or Outro skill, all party members gain a 20% attack buff for 20 seconds. So essentially, by simply playing the character, your entire party gets free attack. Currently from what I know, the average field time of most units in Wuwa hangs around 10 to 15 seconds depending on who you play, meaning you'll basically have this buff active indefinitely. You don't have to know a lot about Wuwa to appreciate a character that has death immunity, a DPS buff, an instant party-wide heal, and on-hit regeneration thereafter. But if you thought that was everything, I still haven't mentioned her Forte Circuit and Outro skill. In case you were worried about a restorative faculty being locked behind just her Liberation, don't be. Her Forte Circuit empowers her heavy attack to restore HP for the entire party and accelerate her Concerto, which in turn lets her Outro swap to provide another substantial HP regeneration buff to the inbound unit, as well as a 30-second long damage buff to the entire party. Yeah, Verina is kind of insane. Mind you, we don't know if future support units will have the same range of options or if Verina is just that good, but consider yourself extremely fortunate if you manage to bring her home. She is easily one of the best characters in the game. Next character will be Danjin, a 4-star Havoc unit and a very fun one at that. Danjin is Wuwa's rendition of the Berserker archetype, someone who trades HP for tons of damage and can stay out in battle for long stretches of time. The basic premise of Danjin is that her Resonance skill has no cooldown. It can be activated as many times as you want with the caveat that she loses HP with every cast. By inputting a certain number of basic attacks prior to using her skill, you get to access evolved versions of them for even more damage. From purely her playstyle alone, I think she'll be a very enjoyable unit. Anime fans love dual-wielding waifus, and with the need for parrying as much as you can, a unit with a relentless attack-type playstyle will naturally achieve a ton of parries, enabling even more damage. That's basically the whole theme surrounding Danjin. Her playstyle is all about attack, attack, attack. Fortunately, she's not at the mercy of her healer, as her Forte Circuit empowers her heavy attack to restore a huge portion of her health. I believe 2 casts of it brings you back to damn near close to full. So your typical attack rotation on her is to weave in attacks with your skill to charge up your Forte Circuit, then use that to replenish your lost health, repeating this cycle over and over again. Danjin has a ton of ways to increase her own damage. Both her inherent skills give bonus DPS, and one of her skill variants applies a mark that gives even more damage. I don't want to make any hard statements because again, closed beta. Characters can change, get buffed or nerfed between now and live release, but Danjin is really strong right now. Don't let her 4-star rarity mislead you. Her constant attack scaling means there's no downtime with her, and her damage scaling is quite impressive. With how important parrying is in Wuwa, having a ton of hits like Danjin makes her excellent for taking on bosses. You can practically chain stun enemies with her. I think when it comes to 4-star units, she's probably my choice for number 1 right now. Plus, she is very fun to play. I've always enjoyed rushdown characters in action RPGs, so assuming she doesn't get nerfed, I'm definitely becoming a Danjin main. For those of you wondering who the other healer that I mentioned in Verina's section is, that will be unit number 3, Baizhi, one of the 3 members of your harem, one of the 3 members you get alongside Chisha and Yangyang. Baizhi happens to be the sole healer available aside from Verina, and longtime viewers of my channel will know that there are 2 ways a character is valuable. They're either the best choice for something or the only choice for something. Baizhi is the latter. Not saying she's not good or anything, she's pretty solid, but with her being literally the only healer, unless you're lucky enough to bring home Verina, gotta make the most of her. Fortunately, Baizhi, aside from being the second hottest girl in Wuwa, let's be real here, is a very serviceable character with a rather fun playstyle. Both her Resonance Skill and Liberation restore HP for the entire team, making for a very stable and reliable healer. She can also buff your team a fair bit, affording 15% bonus attack to your party for 20 seconds whenever using her skill, very reminiscent of Verina's 20% attack buff. Her outro skill is also quite similar. When exiting the field, she offers a slow but long-lasting regeneration buff that comes in tandem with a 15% damage boost for 6 seconds. You can think of her as discount Verina for all intents and purposes, but that's not a bad thing whatsoever considering Verina is absurdly broken for the current standards of the game. Not to mention, she's free, so you don't have to go out of your way to get her. Baizhi's main draw comes from how accessible her healing is. Pretty much everything about her is a heal, from her on-hit damage to her skill to liberation to outro skill to everything, which makes her synergize with any kind of party you would think to go for, whether a quick swap rotation or someone who wants to stay on field for a long time like the aforementioned Danjin. So while Verina's outro skill has more immediate return on healing, Baizhi trades potency for a longer duration, making her the more user-friendly one in my opinion. The one downside is that her Forte circuit only heals herself, not her party, which is a missed opportunity, but again, she's a free character. I don't expect her to be one of the best in the game. All the same, she's someone you should work on for the simple fact that you have no other choice besides her and Verina. So if Baizhi is the second hottest character in the game, who is number 1? This woman, Yinlin, a 5-star electro attacker. Okay, first off, look at that face, look at the jiggle, look at the burst animation. You can't stare me dead in the face and tell me she's not absolute mommy material. Yinlin's expected to be one of the first feature 5 stars alongside Jian when Wuwa comes out, and of the 2, I would put more money on her. Literally. Casting aside all bias, she definitely feels like one of the stronger attackers in the game, though for different reasons than Danjin. While Danjin is more centered on single target DPS, Yinlin focuses more on area coverage. She has a massive attack range courtesy of being a rectifier user, and her abilities themselves also have phenomenal range. Her heavy attack by itself spins her puppet around her for big damage. Her Forte circuit is a massive liberation-sized attack that does humongous damage, and her actual liberation also has huge area coverage and damage. One thing to make note of is that Yinlin appears to have a better time parrying attacks thanks to having a ton of actual lines in her kit, striking 3 times, 4 times, 7, even 10 times per hit. The more total instances of damage you do, the more likely you are to parry enemies mid-combo, just like how Danjin's relentless attack pattern can do the same. Now, while she appears to be more suited for wave clearing, don't underestimate her single target DPS either. Yinlin has a fair bit of uptime thanks to her extended attack rotation, and through basic attacks you can apply a mark to enemies that deals follow-up electro damage with her skill, liberation, and Forte circuit. By this point I should clarify that from what I know, the beta community hasn't quite come to an agreement on what the standards are for good damage. For all we know, the scaling on these units may be ridiculously overpowered, or it might just be par for the course, but out of all the damage dealers in the game, I do believe Yinlin's one of the better ones. The game state of Wuwa looks like it'll necessitate 1 single target DPS and 1 AoE attacker. An interesting thing that incentivizes this is that both Danjin and Yinlin have supportive outro skills, uncharacteristic of units that are classified as main DPSs. For Yinlin, she gives 20% bonus electro damage and 25% bonus liberation damage for the inbound unit, giving the impression that you'll be expected to run a double carry team who can bounce off each other like Calcharo and Yinlin. Not saying this is what you should do, just an example. This isn't a one-time occurrence either. Sanhua gives bonus basic attack damage when switching out, Danjin gives bonus havoc damage, Alto gives bonus arrow damage. These outro skills heavily imply conventional teams will be composed of 2 damage dealers alternating between each other with the healing support running third wheel. But either way, I'm getting off topic. I would wholeheartedly recommend keeping an eye on Yinlin when the game comes out. Last but not least, our very own protagonist, Rover. Can you believe it? A gacha game whose main protag isn't completely useless. Contrary to similar titles, our main character actually has a specific niche rather than being a blank state fighter. The whole motif is based around stopping time, a rather useful ability for a game predicated on quick time events. They're on-field playstyles that of a standard DPSer. Skill does spectral damage, Liberation does spectral damage as well, and Forte Circuit also does spectral damage. Nothing too noteworthy to discuss there. Where the whole time-stopping thing comes from is their outro skill, stasising everything in an area for 3 seconds upon exiting combat. In layman's terms, you get 3 seconds to do pretty much whatever you want. This makes Rover effectively an all-purpose support, as that kind of technique can be taken advantage of by anyone in the cast. Apart from that, technically Rover has a modicum of support through their 4th resonance chain, regenerating the health of the entire party after casting their Liberation. It's not much, but remember, being the MC, you get free sequence nodes, so you can factor all 6 of them when looking at the character. I was somewhat torn between either Rover or Danjin for the last slot in light of both being sort of jack of all trades attack and support units, but a few other players and I felt like it was probably worth highlighting the former. MC units are typically bad or underwhelming so as to incentivize players to pull for other units, and while I don't think Rover is breaking any records among the roster, that outro skill is a huge deal. Like I said, Wuwa is very quick time heavy where split-second mechanical decisions can make all the difference between dealing a lot of damage or taking a lot of damage. Having the ability to essentially stop the enemy from doing anything for 3 seconds affords you tons of potential combo setups for other units. Based on my experience, Rover is one of the faster ones when it comes to switching out, so you will get a ton of use out of this outro skill. Definitely do not overlook your MC believing they're an easy skip as soon as you get more characters. I think they're going to be very underrated when the game comes out. Alrighty, so that wraps up my list. To reiterate, this is all subject to change. Take this video as speculation of noteworthy units to keep an eye on. Naturally, supports will always take precedence over damage dealers, so among the aforementioned 5, I would say Verina is top priority. I hope they include some kind of unit selector feature when the game comes out because I really don't want to have to mob for her. Besides that, a good thing to make note of is to be mindful of things besides damage. We have yet to establish a benchmark for what is considered good DPS or not, and that likely won't happen until the game comes out. With that said, if you guys are excited for Wuthering Waves, once again, I highly recommend you pre-register for the game using my link on screen, which is also in the description. Either way, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments down below. I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my first impressions video on Wuwa if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.